Okay, this is another short one. This one is in terms of like detail. So it's not a FIP yet. In terms of detail, is like I think I well specified enough that we can turn it into a FIP. In terms of motivation, is probably somewhere between opinion and strong opinion that we should actually do this. So it's still open for discussion. Haven't opened a FIP yet. Okay, sectors have biases. What I mean by a bias here is that the storage provider's incentives to maintain a particular sector do not align with what the desired incentives. They do not align with the utility or value of that sector to the network or to other participants, in particular to clients who have data stored in that sector. So when I say bias here, I mean, and when I say bad bias, I mean this misalignment of incentives from what one might think the ideal incentive should be. And bias here, I mean bias between different sectors. So to an individual SP, different sectors that they have committed to have different incentives for maintaining that sector in a good state between the sectors. And those incentives do not line up with whether the sector is doing something useful. So one of these biases, there are two biases. One of the biases is the termination fee. Different sectors have different termination fees. That termination fee is is biased by two different things. Firstly, the termination fee varies with the sector's age in that it increases from 0 up towards its maximum over the first 140 days of a sector's lifetime. So older sectors that have been on the network longer, pay more termination fee than sectors that are new. The termination fee is also biased. So in this, and the fee is expressed as like X days of block reward. It's also biased by what block reward means in that expression, in that it refers to the block reward when the sector was onboarded. This is a number that decreases over time, and so older sectors again pay more because the block reward was higher when they were onboarded. So in two different ways, termination fees between different sectors are different, and they make it so that older sectors pay a higher termination fee than newer sectors. This bias is unrelated to the value of that sector or the cost to an SP of maintaining a sector. All of this is like modulo verified data. So just think of two verified data sectors or think of two non-verified data sectors storing client-paid deals. Obviously, there's a difference between verified and unverified, which has an effect here. That's not the bias I'm talking about. So take two sectors full of Fill Plus deals. They have different termination fees, and they differ based on the age of the sector. If a client is paying, if some client is paying or has a smart contract with a huge insurance premium or something like that, the termination fee doesn't know or care about any of that stuff. The termination fee, but the termination fee affects, if an SP finds themselves in a situation where they need to terminate a sector, they're going to pick the one that has the lowest termination fee. There is no reason for that to be the one that is not storing client data or is not useful to them or is their lowest cost one for maintenance or something like that. As a bonus, maintaining this bias is crazy expensive. The inputs that cause this bias to exist consume 20% of the entire chain state, and the only reason they exist is to bias the termination fees. As a proposal for a different termination fee that's not biased is charge every sector the same termination fee based on the block reward at the time that that sector is terminated. So think of this as like charge 90 of today's BR at termination. This saves 20% of all chain state, removes all the biases, removes any games. And so now the other incentives that an SP might have, like a client paying for them to store data, will be the thing that can flip the balance if they're deciding which sector to terminate. Okay, the same thing plays out in pledge. Different sectors have different initial pledges. This is biased by the circulating supply, the size of the circulating supply at the time the sector was onboarded. This fluctuates up and down. There's not a like obvious necessary trend downwards over time. So this varies for sectors that are on the network today based on the size of the circulating supply when they're onboarded. Generally, we might expect the circulating supply to slowly increase with inflation, but it's not at all required. I think of pledge as the expiration or termination bonus. This is the amount you get paid to terminate a sector. You lose the termination fee, you get the pledge back, whatever's left of the pledge back. So the pledge is a positive incentive to terminate a sector so that you can use those funds that unlock for whatever other purpose, often onboarding a new sector, but nevertheless. This is again unrelated to sector value, modulo Filecoin plus. So for 2 full plus sectors, they might have different pledges based on when they were onboarded. Whether a client is paying for some data or has a huge insurance contract or whatever is not reflected at all in this pledge. But the size of the pledge can vary a lot. 9 months ago, there was like a very large distribution in the actual pledge of sectors. A good like 40% of the network was paying well above, had pledged well above what a new sector today would require as pledge. A lot of that has changed because all of those high pledge sectors terminated or expired. So it's like less severe today in terms of like a overhang. But if the supply fluctuates a lot, such an overhang will come back. My proposal for resolving this one is a bit more nuanced. And what might sound a bit out there to start with. My proposal to resolving this is to allow SPs to unlock pledge from a live sector down to the value that would be required if they were to pledge that sector today. So the network has here's what you need to pledge, some amount of here's the initial pledge for a sector if you onboard it today. Some sectors that were onboarded previously have a higher pledge amount. I'm proposing to let the miner take that pledge back. This doesn't totally remove the bias. There are still sectors that pay more or that have more or less pledge than others, but none of them are worse than a sector that's onboarded today. Worse for the SP's point of view. Initially, this sounds like maybe a bad idea, but let me explain a few reasons why it's less bad than it might sound. So this removes all risks or games associated with a decision between onboarding a sector now or later. Assuming you've got the data or the CC, SPs can look at the pledge fluctuation, make a prediction about whether pledge is going up or down, and they have some game to play about. Is it better to onboard it now because pledge is going up, it'll cost more later, or if pledge is on its way down for some reason, maybe I shouldn't commit this data now. I'll hold off, until pledge gets lower, if that makes a big difference to their total cost. This mechanism will remove any games there. There is no risk to pledging now if pledge is on the way down, because you can just get that if the pledge requirement goes down over time, you can get that back and reuse it later on. So there's no incentive to delay. This unlocking, the potential unlocking, only happens in situations when it doesn't really matter. So in order for there to be an opportunity to unlock excess pledge for a sector, that means the pledge requirements are going down since before. That means the size of the circulating supply is going down. And so in a situation when the circulating supply is contracting, this tends to correlate with there being lots of onboarding, which is locking up lots of tokens. So onboarding is strong, supply is decreasing. And so unlocking, the ability to unlock is only sort of stabilizing this fluctuation. On the other hand, when the supply is growing, there is no opportunity to unlock because your new pledge would be higher than the pledge you put on initially. Supply growing is in cases when lower onboarding relatively. There is no opportunity, there is no incentive to do anything when supply is growing. There's only opportunity to do anything when the supply is shrinking anyway. And so it's a counterbalancing force to fluctuations in the circulating supply. And like I say, removes this now versus later game of choosing when to onboard, which contributes to these fluctuations. Okay, I've got one more slide, but I can see some questions pending. So let me ask, moving the pledge one step further. I previously proposed just taking off the high side of pledge, so over pledge sectors can get it back. That still leaves sectors with different pledges, so they're just the range of differences is bounded on one side. An ideal situation to arrive at would be that the miner just has one pledge which covers all of their sectors rather than specific pledge attached to specific sectors. That removes all bias between sectors. And then here again, you can decide whether the miner as a whole for their entire power could end up over-pledged relative to the marginal pledge required for new power. And then my proposal for allowing them to unpledge that over-pledge would stand. But the point, at that point we can massage it a bit. Maybe that new pledge can't be withdrawn, but can be used for onboarding new sectors instead. So if they're over-pledged, you can onboard for free rather than withdraw. So that would make it like a monotonic pledge still, But anyway, this solves even more minor state, solves more per sector differentiation, scales much better. Right? There's no it removes a piece of per sector state, which is my enemy. I haven't quite figured out how to make this work. This also opens up a lot of potential for then the interaction of pledge with consensus power and things. It could simplify a lot of things there, open up more design space. But I haven't quite figured out how to make this one single pool of pledge work.